Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Stephen Sackur. The coronavirus pandemic has presented governments across the world with a common thread. It has not prompted a united, collaborative response, and the multilateral institutions which have defined our era of globalisation look increasingly fragile. My guest today is Spain's Foreign Minister Arancha González. Has Europe come to terms with a world increasingly defined by American and Chinese nationalism? Foreign Minister Arancha González in Madrid, welcome to Hard Talk.
Great to be with you.
Let us start with the latest on the coronavirus pandemic in Spain. Is your country ready to declare that your national emergency is over?
Well, we will be ending a state of alarm in Spain on the 21st of June. But I don't think we can claim victory against COVID. Until we have a vaccine or a treatment, we have to remain vigilant. So we will end the harsh measures we took to control COVID in Spain, but we will keep everybody on alert to make sure that we can open spaces for freedom, for free circulation, for people's contacts, while ensuring that we will keep COVID under control.
With the Spanish central bank predicting that your economy could contract by between 9 and 11% in 2020, would it be fair to say that your prime concern right now has perhaps switched from the public health crisis, which is easing, to a national economic crisis, which is very, very deep?
Indeed, but I would say this is not a Spanish economic crisis. This is a worldwide crisis. It doesn't matter how good your economy was at the beginning of the crisis. We, for example, in Spain, were growing above EU average. We were creating jobs. We were making much needed reforms. But we've all been impacted by this crisis. This is what we call a systemic shock. It will have different ramifications depending on the country, but we are all being hit hard. This is why we in Spain think that the wisest decision will be now to work in concert, cooperate multilaterally to exit this crisis as soon as we can.
Well, I just wonder whether Spain is beginning to rush things a little bit. You had declared as a government that you were going to open your borders to EU travel on July 1st, and then suddenly, 24 hours ago, you said, no, we're going to do it by June 21st. It seems your travel and tourism sector is taking priority over everything else. You are so desperate to get the economy moving.
Well, actually, this is not correct. We've always said that we will look at the epidemiological data and the preparedness of our regions to face a second wave. This is what is driving decisions in Spain. Other European Union member states have decided to open gradually on the 1st of June, some others on the 15th of June. We've decided to maybe take a little bit longer, 1 week longer, but make sure that we do this. We open the country and the economy gradually, depending on the state of affairs in Spain. We need to make sure that we tell our citizens that we can open in safety for themselves and for anybody else coming to Spain. We want to be known as a country that is open, but it's safe.
There are some anomalies now, though, or at least what looks like an anomalous situation with the United Kingdom, whereby come June 21st, you in Spain are saying all British visitors are welcome to come and there won't be quarantine, there won't be restrictions. And yet at the same time, the British government is saying to anybody coming from Spain that they will have to go into 2 weeks of quarantine. And the irony here is that the British, right now, the British coronavirus infection rate and death toll is, of course, much higher than that in Spain. So it looks entirely anomalous. Are you happy to live with a situation where the Brits impose quarantine on travellers from Spain?
Well, we certainly are not letting people come unchecked into the country. Even when we decide to open the borders, which will be 21st of June, we will still have control at the borders. We will still be checking citizens' temperatures. We will still be asking every person entering the country to register and to give us a contact where we can be in touch in case they declare that they have the symptoms of the virus. There will still be an ability to trace the contacts of this person. There will be high hygiene measures from entry to exit. So it's not as if we were going back to our old norms. We have introduced measures to make sure that we guarantee safety and health for the citizens.
Just this one point though, Minister, on the mandatory quarantine that Spanish visitors to the UK will have to experience, does it seem to you that it's not right and it's not fair that would be the situation for Spaniards entering Britain, but for Brits entering Spain, you are not insisting on a quarantine? Is that tenable?
Well, obviously, all these measures that we are all adapting to the circumstances, we will be checking what the UK will be doing, and we will be in a dialogue with the UK to see whether or not we should be introducing reciprocity as they have different measures than the rest of the European Union. But for the members of the European Union and Schengen countries, we've decided that the best way is to do away with the quarantine measures. We will have them until the 22nd of June. Come 22nd of June, we will remove them. Should the UK want to keep them beyond that date, for reasons that have to do with their own view of health, then we will respect this, but we will probably reciprocate. In other words, all this is a moving target that we have to keep on adjusting. The most important ingredient being to make sure that we respect what scientists are telling us and to act accordingly.
But just to be clear, you say you will probably reciprocate if the UK government doesn't change its current 2-week quarantine rule for people coming in from Spain. You will probably reciprocate and impose that on people from the UK coming into your country.
That's an option if we think that this is necessary to guarantee the health and safety of those Britons coming into Spain. But again, the situation is very fluid, so rather than speculating, what we would like to do is probably engage in a dialogue with the UK authorities to make sure that we both take the measures that best correspond to the health situation, which today is a little bit better in Spain than it is in the UK, but hopefully by the time we open our borders, the UK would have moved forward also.
Let me ask you about the political ramifications of this crisis for Spain, the nation state. We've seen that it's affected different parts of Spain in different ways. Madrid and Barcelona have been particularly badly affected, but the Catalans appear, at least the leadership of the regional government, appear to have concluded that the coronavirus has yet again, in their view, showed the need for an independent Catalan state. They claim that they would have handled the epidemic and the threat to health in a much more efficient way than the Madrid national government did. Do you feel that yet again the integrated nature of the Spanish nation has come under threat here?
Well, it's a very interesting comment, but I would say that Catalans are since 1981 free to run their healthcare. They've got independent management of their healthcare system. So is simply as not true. They've been running their healthcare system, they've been able to purchase their products, they've been able to purchase their medicines, they've been able to contract their personnel, they've been able to organize their hospitals in the best way possible. And when they couldn't do that, the Spanish government, including the army, has been present in Catalonia to support them. In Spain, we have a decentralized system of governance where the regions in Spain, the 17 regions, have autonomy over the management of their healthcare systems. And this hasn't changed with the pandemic. The only thing that we have done is ensure that the the Ministry for Health in the central government could coordinate better the actions of the different regions. But the regions have remained free to manage COVID and the best way possible.
In the past, you've advocated a resumption of negotiations with Catalan regional leaders to try and get past the impasse that we've seen now for so long between Catalan's politics and Madrid's politics. There's no sign, as far as I can see, of any meaningful negotiation resuming, and the Catalans say it can't happen until you release the 9, as they would put it, political prisoners that have been imprisoned on charges of sedition. Is there any likelihood your government will release those people and engage in meaningful negotiation?
Well, first of all, in Spain, we've got an independent system of justice, and it's not the government that tells the judges or the justice systems what to do. They are independent, like in any democracy worth that name, and they decide for themselves. On the dialogue, it's true that before COVID, there was already a dialogue between the central government and Catalonia. The only thing is that COVID changed the order of priorities. What would have been a priority in February was no longer a priority in March, because the national priority in Spain, like anywhere else in the world, was all energy, all hands on deck to address coronavirus. But of course, the Prime Minister has already indicated that he is open to re-engage in a dialogue with the Catalans in order to advance whatever issues need to be discussed. And we would do this like we were ready to do this before COVID, calmly, openly and democratically, which is the basis of our nation.
But it won't go anywhere, will it, unless those 9 individuals who the Catalans insist are political prisoners are in some way or other pardoned and freed?
Well, first, you will understand that I strongly refute the fact that there are political prisoners in Spain. We are in the 21st century. Spain is a mature democracy. There are no political prisoners in our country. But I would also like to remind you, and through you, all the viewers, that in Spain, the justice system is an independent justice system.
Well, Minister, you have made that point. So let us then move from the national scene to the European scene. You worked for some years at the European Commission. You are a strong advocate of a strong EU, an integrated EU. Would you accept that the coronavirus crisis, particularly in its early phases, was a disaster for the European Union with a signal lack of solidarity?
Well, you see, the European Union has very few competences in the area of health. So it's true that at the beginning of this pandemic, which is a health crisis at the end of the day, there were some hesitations on the EU institutions side. But this didn't last long, because we soon realized that what was a health crisis in reality posed a threat to 3 fundamental ingredients of the European Union. One was to the Schengen Agreement, to the movement of people, free circulation within the EU. Second, it was a threat to the internal market, in that at the beginning of COVID, a number of countries decided to take measures to restrict circulation of medicines or protective equipment within the EU, something that should not be done. And the third threat, and this is a fundamental one, is a threat to the economic and monetary union. And this is why, after this initial hesitation, I think the response that the European institutions have given to COVID has been swift, has been robust. Of course, we are not yet there, in that there is a missing part that we're still trying to construct.
You're not there,
but
Minister.
I would say that in Europe we learned the lessons from 2008, and this time around we have been better prepared to face this pandemic.
That's a very positive spin, if I may say so, because we've seen the EU Commission come out with a proposal to find on the financial markets more than 750 billion euros of borrowed money to pump into those countries worst affected by coronavirus, and that of course would include Spain. But there is no agreement on this recovery fund at all. It's supposed to be part of the next EU budget. It will require the unanimous agreement of all 27 member states, and it is clear that at least 4, Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden and Austria, are simply not prepared to accept it, because they see it as an unacceptable form of debt mutualization.
Well, it's true that we've still got work to do on two fundamental pieces for the medium to long-term recovery of the European economy. One is the budget for the next 7 years, and the second is the recovery fund. These two are fundamental ingredients, not just for Spain or Italy, France or Greece. These are also fundamental ingredients for Austria, the Netherlands, Denmark or Sweden, because what's at stake
but
here
if I may say so, this is
the solidity of the European internal market. And this is the market that belongs to all the Europeans.
Yes,
and this is the market that we need to leverage to have a rapid exit from the crisis.
Well, I can understand you in Madrid are very excited to make this happen because you're going to benefit from it, but it is a backdoor plan to get the rich north of the EU to help you avoid new borrowings to get yourselves out of the mess that you're currently in, and the northern nations don't want to do it. That's the reality.
Well, I like to question that assertion because it's not as if the beneficiaries of this recovery fund and EU budget would only be Spain, France or Italy or Greece. For every euro that a Dutch or an Austrian invests in the European Union, it gets double the benefit in the internal market than a Spaniard or an Italian.
Well, you said
we should be doing the right accounts.
Well,
we should be running the right accounts.
You said
we should be explaining to our citizens that this common investment is as much as important to a Spaniard that it is to a Dutch. Because at the end of the day, what's at stake is whether or not we can exit this crisis rapidly.
Right.
And if we do, there will be no social pain. But if we don't, we will all, irrespective of where we're sitting, whether we are sitting in the north or in the south, suffer the consequences of a slow recovery.
Right, well maybe the Dutch aren't listening to you because the PM in the Netherlands, Mark Rutte, still says that this has to be about loans rather than mutualization of debt. And as you know, you said a few weeks ago, I think, this has to happen urgently, but it still hasn't happened, and it's going to be knocked to the next leaders summit. And frankly, there's no sign of common agreement on this. So you're in big trouble.
Well, I don't think that I would not agree with your characterization. What we are all trying to do now is build the consensus. Like anywhere else, building consensus in Europe is long, is arduous, is tedious, but that is how you get to a deal.
Yeah,
remember, this time around, my Prime Minister, Pedro Sánchez, barely 3 months ago, said we needed a big Marshall Plan for Europe. And here we are 3 months later discussing the contours of this Marshall Plan. So well, Minister, no, I don't spend too much time arguing. We have to spend much more time doing, building the consensus that will get us to have a recovery instrument to help our citizens, workers and business people alike.
But we all know that EU negotiations often take a very long time. Let's turn to one other negotiation that is also right now stuck in impasse, and that's the negotiation between the EU and the United Kingdom on what a trade deal might look like. We're currently in a transition period. It is now clear that there'll be no extension of the transition, so it will end at the end of 2020. And right now, looking at the words of Monsieur Barnier, the chief EU negotiator, and Boris Johnson and his team in London, it seems there is going to be no negotiated trade deal. It looks as though the UK may formally end its relationship with a return to WTO trade rules in its relations with the EU. That'll be a disaster for the EU economy at a time when your economy is very vulnerable. How worried are you?
Well, I think we are at a time of incredible turmoil, and the economies of the world, including the UK and Europe, are today going through a turmoil. When you've got such a situation, the last thing you want is to add volatility. Your responsibility, our collective responsibility, the UK and the European Union today, is to add stability to the global economy. And we can add this stability by negotiating the terms of the agreement that will bind a UK outside the European Union with the EU. This is why the message is pretty simple. Sit down and start negotiating. It's a message that at least we in Spain, as part of the EU and the EU negotiator, Mr. Barnier, has been giving to the UK team. We know that the UK will not ask for an extension of this deadline. But if this is the case, let's just simply sit quickly and start negotiating. Let's make sure we add a stability to our economies and not further volatility. That is this is what responsible
Just very briefly, British Minister
right
Michael Gove a few weeks ago said he thought that the coronavirus pandemic and its effect on the European economy would, quote, focus European minds on making the concessions necessary to get a deal. Is he right?
Well, I think a negotiation is an affair between two. It takes two to tango. So what we need to see is a disposition on the UK side to come to the table with a clear sense of moving those negotiations forward.
I want to talk, before we end, about geopolitics. How worried are you about the European relationship with what has traditionally been your strongest partner, transatlantic partner, the United States of America? We have Donald Trump's administration withdrawing from the World Health Organization. In the last few days, we've had the United States talking about imposing new sanctions on officials from the International Criminal Court, calling the International Criminal Court corrupt. You're the Foreign Minister of Spain. How worried are you about the deteriorating relationship between Donald Trump's White House and the European Union?
We certainly value the transatlantic relationship a lot. We value this historical links with the United States. We value the interest and the values that bind us.
Yeah, but Minister, I'm asking you specifically what you make of Donald Trump's. What
this relationship requires today a bit of a updating in its sense of purpose. In any relation, you need to understand why you are together. What is it that binds you to the other side? And for a long time, we've been running without really asking ourselves, what sense does this relationship has? What's the purpose of being in this transatlantic relation? And if I may, sitting here in Spain, I would say that we need to reinvent. It used to be bringing democracy. It was about fighting totalitarianism. I think we have to bring it to this new level that is the 21st century. And I would say rehumanizing globalization should be the sense of purpose that we put into this transatlantic relation. And it would take the two of us to invest and to nurture this relationship if we want it to work.
But specifically, tell me very quickly, because we're almost out of time, what you, as Foreign Minister of Spain, make of the United States withdrawing from the WHO and now putting new sanctions on the International Criminal Court?
Well, we value multilateralism, and we think that it's better to engage in multilateral organizations, to reform them from within, rather than to leave seats empty that others will occupy in the future. So engage, participate, reform, but have a seat at the table.
And a final thought, what we see is, frankly, the looming Cold War, it seems, between the United States and China, both of them pursuing economic protectionism of a different sort or other, both of them, it seems, interested in nationalist politics right now. The European Union, with its weak economy that we've discussed, doesn't appear to be in very good shape to adapt to this new world, bipolar world of US-China tension and Cold War. What is the European Union going to do?
The EU needs to regain a bit more strategic autonomy. The EU needs to be stronger in order to have a say in international matters, in order to weigh in this much more geopolitical world. And this is why what happens over the next weeks in the recovery, with the recovery package and the budget for the European Union is very important. If Europe ends this crisis strong, robust, it will have a say in shaping this much more fractured geopolitical world. If we do not invest in a stronger Europe, including in a strong recovery package to exit this crisis, then we will just simply not be up to shaping tomorrow's world. And that's what we have to tell our citizens too.
Minister Arancha González, we have to end there. I thank you very much for joining me from Madrid.
Always a pleasure.